everyone, just wanted to talk to you guys today. We're going to show you 5 common problems that happen when you're trying to apply your labels to your bottles. Come along, let me show you how it's done. What I'm adjusting now is the spacers that go on the labels here. So when I put them down through the machine, so that the labels don't ride up and down, I adjust these little collars here so it doesn't move up and down. And so then when you put it on, when it applies to the bottle or the thing you're applying to, it stays in the same exact spot every time. And then I'm threading it through the eye reader, and this eye reader here reads the in-between labels. So it reads this area here on the label, so then it knows where to stop after every label is ejected off the labeler. And as I go through, this part right here is called the peel bar. Okay, it's a sharp bar that's on here to then when you pull the labels through, it releases the label off the liner. And you'll see as I'm pulling it through, it's pulling a label off the liner. So this is called a peel bar. This here, this back part here, is called the nip roller. And this nip roller here is where the motor drives the label through, and it pulls the whole entire web through the process. So when it ejects the label, this thing rotates and pulls this web through the whole thing. And this part here is the take-up, where it takes up all the waste. Something that I would recommend everybody doing is buying a little bit extra labels than what they have for bottles. For example, if you have 100 bottles, I'd probably order 110 labels, because sometimes the labels will get ruined in the process of threading your machine when you're putting it through the machine. And it's, there's a little bit of a burn rate that you kind of have to accommodate for that. We normally give you a few extra labels per roll to help with that, just to help combat that problems that sometimes people have. But that's something that you might want to think about when you're labeling a lot of products, because there's times where the label machine doesn't work 100% correctly, and you have to kind of fidget with it to get it working again. And that's something to kind of think about when you're ordering labels, because last thing you want to do is not send out all your product because you bought maybe just a touch too little amount of labels. Okay, one of the first things you want to do here is, if you look inside here, you can see how far that label is out on the web. The ideal spot that you want to have on the label sticking off of the web, they call this a tag. And what you want to do is you want to have your label just sticking just a little bit off there. So we're going to change the length of where it ejects from. So you'll see the label moving down here slowly. It comes off. You want to just have just a little bit hanging off the edge here. You don't want to have the whole entire thing coming off. Just a little bit. Now I'm going to attach the waste onto here so it can pull it all together. Once you have your label machine webbed up correctly and you want to throw it, the first thing you're going to do is you're going to test your first label on here. What you're going to do is you throw it down the line. You notice there, nothing's on the label. The label got stuck in the web here. It didn't apply the label to the jar. So let's try another one. This time, one of the common mistakes here that happens is you don't have enough pressure on the labels. And all these labels are pressure sensitive. So when the adhesive touches it, the more pressure you put down on the label, the more it's gonna wanna stick. Think about the adhesive kind of like a suction cup. So when you push down there, it's gonna wanna suction and hold onto there. So that's why they're called pressure sensitive labels. So what we wanna do here, you want to give it a little bit more pressure. And it's kind of a fine balance. You don't want to give it too much pressure, because then you're just going to crush your bottle and you're going to have a mess. So you want to have enough pressure for the label to hit on there, but not so much where it's going to make the bottle really squeeze. So let's try this one more time. This one's probably a little too much because now I can't get the bottle through the machine. So let me back it up a little bit. Let's try again. All right, so it went through. As you can see, this pad is constantly rotating around and giving it a nice pressure to the label. Another common problem that happens is, if you look here, the label is upside down. Okay, we don't want that. That means that the rewind direction of the label is wrong. So what that means is that when you order your labels and you're going to be machine applying, it's very important for you to know what is your rewind direction of your machine you're going to be applying these labels to. And in the order process, we do ask that question, but if you have any problems with it, we would be more than happy to talk to you about what does rewind direction mean and how can it be applied to the machine that I bought or that I have for my labels. And we can definitely help you with that so we can get your labels not this direction, but the right direction. You ask, what do I do if I get the labels in the wrong direction? Now, one thing you could do, and this is a quick fix, and if you need to get your product out really fast, is just wind them the other direction. So basically what I'm gonna do on this one that's in the wrong direction is we have a machine we can do this on, but you can do this by hand as well. And I can show you how to do that here in a second. Is I'll start the machine and I'll start winding the roll the other direction. So instead of the left side coming off first, it's now gonna be the right side of the label coming off. And if you wanna do this by hand, what you do is you could take a core, or you could take the core out of this, and then you can hand wind it back the other way. Now, it's not ideal, but if you need this done in a pinch, then this will help you get your labels in the right direction. You can also, if something's wrong with your labels and they're not in the right direction, and you know, if something needs to get fixed, you can always send them back to us, and we'll be happy to put your labels in the right direction and help with that process too, especially if there's a lot of them. So we would be more than happy to help you with any of those types of things as well. All right, another common issue that happens with the labeling equipment is your gap sensor. Now, your gap sensor is what makes the label where it knows in the space of the machine. So it knows where to stop for the next label to come out, because if you didn't have a gap sensor, it would just be shooting labels one after another through the system because it doesn't know when to stop or when to start. So the gap sensor that you have on your machine is important to calibrate and also to have set up in the right spot. And I'll show you on ours over here. Now it's reading the in between the label. So it's reading the kind of the liner area so it knows when to start and when to stop. And if you see here, I have the sensor far enough down into the web of the labels where it's gonna read it. If I had it sitting up here, if I had it sitting up in this area here, well, it's not passing over the sensor bar where it needs to read, and it'll just not read anything. So you wanna make sure you have this down here into the sensor, so then when it passes over, it can read it. So as you see here, it has a little light that's on as well. So another common question people have is, how do I know my sensor's working and is it calibrated right? So this is something how I do it to test this is usually I'll take a label off the liner here and apply it down the web a little bit so I have a nice big gap in here. And you can kind of see here that the light's not on there, the little red light underneath the green light. So what I do is I'll just move this down here to see if it's working. Now you see the red light on, and you see the red light off. And you can kind of see how that's sensing. So it knows, hey, I'm gonna read this back liner here, not the label. So then it tells you what position you need to be in. Now, there's a lot of different types of sensors, and there's a lot of different sequences that happen depending on what kind of sensor you have. So to reset the whole process, it might be different for your different types of machines. But how I do it on this machine particularly is I'll hold this second button down and I'll hold it, and then it kind of flashes really quick and then it goes bright again. That tells me that, hey, I'm reading that as my background, and that's the area I wanted to stop on. So when it goes over it again, I'll test it, the red light turns on. Now if the red light didn't turn on, that tells me that the sensor's not sensing the label, and you have to reset the whole sensor all over again. Like I said, not all sensors are the same, so there might be a different sequence, but that's how this machine works. Now, if you don't have these spacer bars in the right spots, what can happen is you can start to fray at your liner here. Well, if it starts to fray at your liner, it could break. And then the whole web breaks, and it's gonna be a mess. Then you're gonna have to re-web the whole entire thing. So it's very important to know where your spacer bars are at, and are they getting in the way? Is it creating this kind of fraying that you see here? Because if it is, then you can have an issue and you need to either clean the machine or make sure you check where your spacer bars are at. First one came through. We're a little high, so we want to adjust that down a little bit. So this machine here has an adjustment for how high or low you can eject the label. So I'm going to drop this down just a touch and try one more time through there. And this is a good reason why you want to have multiple labels, because you can see that it has wrinkles through this label. This label is probably going to have to be thrown away, because if I have to reapply this, you're going to see the wrinkles in the label. Closer. It's getting closer, but we also have a problem with it not being 100% even, but we'll get to that in here in a few minutes. But right now, let's work on how high or low our labels are. Just going to move it down just a little bit more. Okay, it looks like we have our height pretty close. As you can see here, you can see the labels are just a little bit off. It's not 100% even back here, and you can kind of see that as you look through here. It almost has this kind of candy cane effect happening with this. Now, something to think about that a lot of people don't realize is that a lot of these bottles are not straight up and down. If they're straight up and down, a nice straight label will look perfectly across these, but there's a lot of bottles out there or containers that have a taper to it, and they kind of look like, like a taper, which you would see like kind of in an hourglass shape, where it starts out big in the top and then it gets smaller at the bottom. And you can see on this specific label here, you can kind of see the taper in the opposite direction, where it's small at the top and then the bottom of it has a bigger gap at the bottom. That's to accommodate this bottle here has a taper to it. So what we need to do here to fix this problem that we have here where it's not on is we need to start manipulating the way the label is getting put onto the bottle. And how we do that is with this bar. So what I'm going to do, and all machines are a little different, sometimes the whole entire unit moves up and down, but sometimes it's just the bar that gets manipulated. On this specific machine, we have to manipulate this bar. So what I'm going to do, you can see here they kind of have little sliders where I can move this bar back and forth on these screws to kind of find the right position for it. So I'm going to loosen that up, pull it back a little bit, tighten it back down. Let's try again. Now, usually when the labels get to this place here, I can hand take them off, so I'm not losing any labels. And I can hand apply back to normal. So I can take the label off and put it on the bottle so I'm not losing any labels. And the more you do this, the better you get at it. And I'm sure you guys know exactly how that feels. So you can kind of get it in a better shape where it's acceptable to push through the system. So then we'll put this one in with the good pile. And let's try this again with the next bottle. Okay, looked like it came off nicely. Let's look at it. Okay, closer. We're closer here. But if you notice, the label kind of rode back up again. Well, when we do a manipulation on the bar here, it actually changed the angle of everything. So then it actually moved everything up. So we want to bring this back down again. So I'll make another adjustment here, and I might make one more adjustment on here to pull it back a little bit more. Okay, making just small little adjustments at a time and taking your time doing that. Now, we're looking pretty good here. So the only thing I would do is maybe come down just a little bit more, but that's looking pretty tight and pretty nice. Now, as I make these adjustments, I'm just making very small little moves because I want to do an overcorrection on the machine. Because what happens when you do an overcorrection, everything swings back to the other way, and then you're trying to just kind of fine tune back to normal. Whereas if you just do little things, an inch towards the direction you want it to go, I found that it was a lot easier and a lot faster and a lot less frustrating to find the perfect position of where you want your labels on the web. Now that's getting pretty close. I'm getting pretty happy with where that's sitting on the machine. So this is where I would probably be okay to start running it. Now you're gonna see a little bit of movement back and forth just with the nature of some bottles not all bottles are created equal. Some are a little bit bigger, some are a little bit smaller. There's always a tolerance that happens. So when I see a little bit of movement on the backside here, can we fix it and get a little bit closer? Yeah, maybe, but I might start running the job and making just small, minor little tweaks, or I could start my running of production here. But this is pretty close, and this is kind of where I want the whole setup of the label to be at. So kind of going back through some of the common pitfalls that happens is, one, make sure your rewind direction's right. If you look here, unlike the last one we saw where the label is upside down, this is sitting right side up on this label. Double check all your spacers and your web path is right. So you look through here, making sure everything, you don't see anything weird. Go through your sensor, making sure your sensor is working correctly, and always do your preventative maintenance. Some things that happen with the sensor, you think, hey, my sensor stopped working. Well, what can happen is dust can build up on the sensor so it can't read properly. So go in there with like a cloth, like a lint-free cloth, and just wipe down the sensor. There's not a lot much you have to do with it, but sometimes that can be a problem. The tag, when you have the label just sticking out just a little bit on the web, making sure it sits there. And then everything looks clean. And then look at your liner. Look at the liner where the waste is coming on. Does everything look nice and clean on the waste? Do you see anything weird about it? Sometimes could happen, and this can happen from a manufacturer, is the labels are cut too deep, okay? What you're gonna see if a label is cut too deep, that the label doesn't come off the peel bar, it actually goes around and stays on the web. And that's a tell sign that the label from when they're cutting the labels is get cut too deep, and so it kind of sticks into the liner web, and that could cause a lot of problems. Another sign that it might be cut too deep is if the web snaps. You run a couple labels through and everything looks fine, and then all of a sudden, boom, the liner snaps on you. That tells me that there's probably a nick in the liner from when they were manufacturing the labels, and the label has been cut too deep. Now, ways you could check that to see if it's cut too deep, obviously, is by your eye and looking at the liner, just making sure everything looks okay. But if it's still happening and you're like, man, this just doesn't seem like it's working too well, is you could take a Sharpie to your liner and take a Sharpie to the liner and make sure that it's everything looks okay, so you can kind of see what a good label looks like and what a bad label would look like. And one last thing I want to talk about is making sure your label is right for your bottle. Now, this is something that we can help you with and kind of figure out with your bottle to make sure that you have the right size. But something that is important for you to look at is making sure that happens, because the last thing you need is you buy the labels, you buy the bottles, you get ready to put it on your product, and it doesn't fit. This is a great example of that. Now, this label is way too long for this bottle, because when I wrap here, it ends up, and this label is way too long for it, because then I'm gonna start covering it if I wrap it all the way around, and we don't want that. Another thing you can see with this is you're wasting space from the top side to the bottom side, where you can make it a little bit thicker and not maybe as long to make this product work a little bit better with the bottles that you have. Again, we can help you with this, but this is a good example of not the right label for the right container and making sure you have the right sizes for the container you have. Like, again, ask our customer service. We'll be happy to help you figure what works best for what you have. So then when you get your labels, it works perfectly with your bottles and everything goes seamless, and then you can keep making your products and not have to worry about this part of the process. We're more than happy to help you look for that and help you with that whole entire thing. So now that we went through all 5 common problems that happen when putting labels onto bottles, another video that we do have that might be really useful for this is how to measure a tapered container and also make a tapered label. We'll link that video in the description, and if you have any questions at all, don't hesitate to ask us. We're more than happy to help you with this, and we look forward to seeing you again on the next video. Bye, Yetis.